Hello, 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 Facebook. Good afternoon. Welcome to another live. I'll give you a second to kind of come on in this room, to get on in here. We're going to talk about something really important today, especially with all this happening, not just in the world, but especially in America. And so tune on in, you guys. Come on in here. We're going to have a deeper conversation around this. If you all have been following my last few videos that I've done, this is going to be a deeper dive into those. So I did a video a few days ago around how black and white relations, around the message that I had gotten downloaded from my guides, around how black and white relations have to do with the ego and the soul consciousness, and how healing racism is going to help, is going to require us to understand those parts of our brain and our consciousness, and to bring them into balance. So we're going to go into a deeper dive into this particular, hey Tyrone, hey Zoe, I see you, a deeper dive into this conversation. I've been getting a lot around this. So if you're new to me, my name is Jerome Braggs. I am a channel, an energy worker, and an intuitive healer. And I help people heal themselves from all ailments in their lives and in their bodies through the practice of love. And so we're going to dive deeper into kind of how to heal this from that perspective today. And I've been getting a lot of... Raheem, I see you, brother. Yeah, I have to give y'all a little bit today. I'm trying to give you just a little bit. Not too much, though, just a little bit. I am going to be, I've been receiving some downloads from, I work with some spirit guides, which I call a team of spirit guides, which I call the Beloveds. Hi, Debbie. Thank you for joining. I work with a team of spirit guides called the Beloveds, and they are a higher consciousness that is non-physical, and they speak to me. And if you've ever worked with me personally, if you've ever had a session with me or been in any of my workshops or anything like that, you have seen me work with them before. But I work with guys, and they help me get higher wisdom around certain aspects, especially around healing. And they have been giving me a lot of information in the last few weeks around what is really going on between the conflict between black and white peoples in America, and what is the path, the real route to the path of healing for that. And when I say I got a lot of notes, y'all, I got like a whole notebook full. So I'm going to be reading a little bit from the notes today. Last month, I did a video series on healing the throat chakra. And this month, we're going to be talking about healing race relations, really justice. So this is going to be Justice June. Last month was Say What You Need to Say May. This is going to be Justice June. And I'll be doing many videos throughout this month. So this is the first one. But hang in tight. We're going to go deep in this one. If you have just some housekeeping, if you have any questions, please put hashtag Ask Jerome and then write your question. Hashtag Ask Jerome and then write your question, and that'll let me know that there's a question that you want to have to be answered. I know today is Blackout Tuesday for all of my fellow black family. I know today is Blackout Tuesday, and I really stand in solidarity with you, and I honor your choice to do that. I was guided very strongly by my guides and by my higher self to speak today, to not silence my voice today, because I have had a history of being silent around this. So to use my voice to share this, because this is going to be a medicine for us, for black people specifically, and also for white peoples, that we begin to heal this rift of racism. So if you are practicing Blackout Tuesday today, thank you. I highly, highly stand with you, and I send you love and energy. But that is not what I have been guided to do for myself today. And I hope that you understand and that you respect it. So that was the first thing about housekeeping. Second thing, keep the comments respectful. I practice strong boundaries. So any disrespectful comments and any disrespectful people in the comment section will be deleted or blocked. This is a very touchy subject that is going to also, if you're not familiar with energy, if you're not familiar with consciousness and vibration, this may be new information for you. And if it is that case for you, if you're not familiar with those things, I ask that you just listen. that you just listened today, because this is going to be new information and it may trigger some things for you, and that's completely fine. I'm completely open for that. But listen, if you do have questions, like legitimate questions about what I'm saying today and what I'm going to be offering, please put them again, Ask Jerome, hashtag, and I'll answer them. Even if I can't get to them all during this live video, I'll try to answer them in another video, because I'll be doing a lot of videos this month. All right, so let's dive into it. Let's go straight in. So the first thing my guys wanted me to talk about and wanted me to share was to really bring back the awareness of why the soul chooses to incarnate into this world and into this lifetime. There are many options for the soul to incarnate in. There are many different worlds. This is one. This is not the only one that exists. This is not the only dimension that exists. This is not the only physical reality that exists for the soul to exist in. And as a matter of fact, and I won't go into this particular thing very, very long, because this takes a whole nother video by itself. Hey, Christina, thank you. Christiana, I said Christina, but I hope I pronounced it correctly if it's Christiana. There are many different options for the soul to manifest in, to be physical in. This is one. And the entirety of your soul does not manifest all here. So what you see right now with me talking to you is not the entirety of my soul. My soul is also having other manifestations in other dimensions and in other realities at the same time as I'm having this life. Now, we're not going to go fully into that conversation today, because that's a whole nother hour to have. But this is real. Like, your soul this is not the only lifetime that your soul is living. This is one of your lifetimes that your soul is living, and it's living several of them at the same time. So it chooses to come into this particular life, into Earth, into this universe experience, because this is the dimension of duality. And so what I mean by dimension of duality, you may have heard this before, but this is the dimension of duality. And so duality means that when you're in the dimension of the soul, when you're in the dimension of what we call heaven, or the dimension of God, when you're in your full God self and you're in your non-physical, in the spiritual realm, that's the dimension of oneness. So that's the dimension where everything is you know everything is connected. You know everything is part of you. You are not just connected to source or connected to God. You are God. You are it. You are the all that is, right? And there's no separation. There's no experience of separation. There's no consciousness of separation in that dimension. And you don't have a perspective of a self in that dimension, because everything is one. There is no individual self. It's all one. And so one of the reasons why you manifest here on Earth is to have the perspective of the self. You have a perspective of the self. You have to experience the illusion of duality, which means there's something other than you, right? And you have several things. So my perspective, like, it's me here. I'm talking to my phone, which is different from me. I'm talking to you all that are watching, which are different from me. There's these paintings behind me that are different from me. In this dimension, you have the illusion and the perspective of there being something else. And in the other dimension, there is only one. And you realize that all of this is you, right? And when I had my near-death experience, and if you've been following me for a while, you know I've had a near-death experience where I crossed over to the other side. And if you want to learn more about that, you can go to my YouTube channel and watch many of my videos there. I talk about that in detail, but I won't be doing that today. But one of the big first things that happened for me when I crossed over to the other side is I went into the dimension of oneness, and I felt the oneness with everything. Like, I couldn't tell the difference. There was no difference between me and another person. There was no difference than me and like an object. Everything was one. And so you come from that dimension. There's oneness. We come to Earth, and our soul chooses to have a human life, to experience being human, which is the basis of being human. Is you have an individual self and you have an individual perspective. And that perspective is different depending on how you choose to manifest. So the soul chooses not just to be human, but it chooses the family. It chooses the location, meaning like the country and the part of the country that it manifests in. It chooses the color of its skin that it wants to manifest in. So my soul chose to be black. It chooses some parts of the sexuality, because sexuality also can change when you get here, depending on what kind of perspective you want. But it chooses an aspect of sexuality. It chooses a lot of these things because these offer perspective. These things offer perspective. They offer different viewpoints on the world. They offer different opportunities to manifest things and attract things to you. And they offer different ways for you to practice being unconditional love. And so the first thing my guys wanted to say was, you have to remember why we came here. We came here to practice being and expressing the unconditional love that we are. Because that's what the soul is. The soul is literally the energy, the vibration and frequency, and the truth of love, unconditional love. And so one thing about this dimension is not just duality, but the other part of this dimension is there are conditions. And so you are an unconditional being, meaning your soul vibrates love unconditionally no matter what, right? And you come here in this dimension to experience conditions that will challenge you. Like when people say Earth is a school, it's not a school where like you're getting grades and there's somebody judging you about how good you are and they're going to determine whether or not you graduate or not. It's not a school like that. Earth is a school meaning that it's more like a gym. And if you think about it as like a gym and a playground. So it's where you kind of learn how to strengthen certain skills, and you learn how to develop certain skills. And through that development, you expand and you grow. Just like in a gym, like you learn how to lift certain weights and you strengthen certain muscles of your body. And then you grow, your body grows and it defines and it gets, quote unquote, healthier and better and bigger. This is what life is. It's like a gym. It's not a school where there's somebody like judging you and saying you need to learn this or you can't graduate. That's not what happens that's not actually, we've been kind of misteaching that, especially in spiritual circles. It's more like a gym. And you come here to strengthen your ability to express the unconditional love that you are in conditional circumstances. And one of the things that you do when you choose to come into a soul, what my guys were telling me specifically was, when we choose to come into black or white skin in America, what we are coming to choose into is one of the things for life that helps you kind of, I'm trying to find the words here, the perfect words here, that helps you develop and balance into the unconditional love that you are, is you choose, the different perspectives you choose operate out of different parts of the consciousness. And so remember when I said that in the beginning, this is the dimension of duality. And so in this dimension, there are two parts to your consciousness. And there is the ego consciousness. And this is another part that, we're not really taught a lot, and we've been misteaching, especially in spiritual fields, is that the ego consciousness. We have been demonizing the ego consciousness, and we have been teaching that you need to get out of your ego, and that you need to suppress it, and you need to really try and run over into the soul part of your consciousness. And this has caused a lot of problems, and you're going to see why I'm going to speak about this directly today. What my guys have shown me around this is the ego part of the consciousness is the part of the brain that allows you to have a self. Right? It's the part of the brain that allows you to have an individualized experience. It allows you to be human in a physical form. And it's also the part of the consciousness that allows you to have a personal experience of life. Without the ego part of your consciousness, you can't have a personal experience. That is the part of you that helps you identify I. And it's the part of you that helps you identify what I personally need and what I personally want and what I am here to express into the world. This is where your purpose comes from. This is where your dreams are. And we'll talk a little bit more about this in a second. But the ego part of the consciousness is needed for that. If you do not have the ego part of the consciousness, then you will not have that. So, and I'll go into this in deeper part of this in a second. But that's one part of the consciousness, right? The other part of the consciousness is the soul consciousness. This is the consciousness where you do have your oneness. You do have the higher understanding of things. You feel connected to everything. This is where your art and your intuition come from, and your talents and your passions and things like that are in there. But if you are only in that side of the brain, and you're only in that side of the consciousness, this is why they're together. So the part of duality that happens is duality lets you think that they're two sides of the same coin, right? Because the truth of it is they're the same. They're one, they're connected, but they appear different. That's the illusion part of it. And you did manifest here to kind of play in the illusion, but to still hold to the truth, which is both of these things belong. So to the soul, it's both and. It's not either or. It's both and. So you need both. And I'm going to get to all of it. I have to lay this foundation so we can talk about what this all has to do with black and white people and race relations and racism. I'm going to tie all of this in, and we're going to go really deep into this all this month. But I need to lay this foundation for you to understand this. So this is a dimension of duality. You will have two sides to yourself. And you see this everywhere. We have the light and we have the dark. The sun and the night, like the day and the night. You've got male, you've got female. You have, it's all of this. You have two sides it's like two sides to everything. This is the dimension of duality again. You have two sides to everything. Even with your body, you have this physical body and you have an energy body, which we're not taught a lot about, by the way. But you have an energy body. This is a lot where you're learning about the chakra system. The chakra system is part of your energy body. But you have this physical body that you see, and you also have an energy body. Both of them are real. Both of them are connected to each other, right? And this is the importance that we're coming to learn. Like, this is what we came to understand. We came to operate as souls in the duality and to move in both spaces. This is very important right here. This is what my guides were making very highly important. We came to move in both. We did not come to exist only in one side. In the human side or in the spiritual side, we came to operate and move in both. So you came to move in both sides of your consciousness, the ego side of your consciousness and your soul side of your consciousness. This is the importance when we're talking about race. So this is the other piece of it before we dive deeper into understanding what the ego side of the consciousness does and what the soul side of the consciousness does. And if you're just joining and you have questions, remember, you can totally ask me questions during this. Just put your questions in the comments with the hashtag Ask Jerome, and then write your question, and that lets me know there's a question that I need to respond to. So here's the thing. The soul chooses the different color for it to come into, because that color actually collectively, let me see how to say this. Let me tune in again. So you choose different aspects. Remember when I said you come in and you choose different aspects of reality to experience and exist inside of? Like, you choose to be male, you choose your color, or you choose to be female, you choose your nation, you choose your the nation you're born in, you choose your family. Okay, so here's what my guide said. When you choose to be black, when your soul chooses to incarnate into a black lifetime in America specifically, so I'm just speaking about America today. So when you choose to be a black American and you choose to manifest in a lifetime where you were born here and where you live here as a black person, what that soul also chooses to do is you're going to choose to operate inside of the soul consciousness part of your brain more. So you're going to be soul consciousness dominant. And I'm going to talk about what that is and what that looks like in a second. Remember, one side of the brain is not better than the other. We have been mistaught about this. We have been highly taught that the ego part of the consciousness is bad And I'm going to show you why that's not true. They both have wounds, and we're going to talk about that in a second and what happens when you're wounded in that part of the brain and you're imbalanced. And it's really about imbalance, when you're too far dominant in that side and you don't move into the other side. And the soul consciousness part of the soul consciousness is what my guides told me is it resides into the right side of the brain. So if you understand the left and the right side of the brain, and the left brain is responsible for thinking a different side of thinking and a different side of skills, and the right side of the brain is responsible for a different part of thinking and a different side of skills. This is absolutely true. This is scientifically based. And what my guide said was the soul consciousness is on the right side of the brain. And when you manifest as a black being in America during this particular part of humanity, you have come to exist more outside of the right side of the brain, of the soul consciousness aspect. And when you manifest as a white person, when your soul says, I want to have a white lifetime in this particular part of humanity, in this particular part of their evolution, and in this part of the world, which is America, when you manifest into a white body here, you came to exist predominantly in the left side, in the ego part of the consciousness. And you are going to see this when I start to describe what that means and how that shows up. You will start to understand yourself a little more. You will start to understand yourself a little more. And you're going to also start to see why we're having such conflict with each other around racism here, and begin to understand a little bit more. And again, I'm going to be speaking about this all month, so I'm going to go very deep into this. This is just the first part, but you're going to understand a little more about what it actually is going to take for us to start to heal racism and the racial conflict between the two of us here in this country. So to understand this is what you choose. And one is not better than the other. They just offer different perspectives, and they offer different gifts. So you are here to express unconditional love, and these parts of the brain help you express different aspects of the love that you are in the world when you're in them. But you also come here, you're going to be dominant more on one side, but you're also going to learn, you're here to learn how to balance and maneuver back and forth between the two. And what ends up happening is you get socialized and traumatized into going hyper into one side. And so you get imbalanced. And so instead of having access to both sides of your consciousness, the ego and the soul, or the left and the right side of the brain, you end up being completely on the other side. And that causes a lot of problems. We are not here to be completely on one side. You're here to have one side of the consciousness be more dominant, but there's still a balance. Is when you're more led by one side of the consciousness, or you'll be more led by the ego side of the consciousness, or you'll be led by the soul consciousness, but you will have access to the other side, and you will still operate from that side. And that's where you become a fully actualized soul. That's when you become a fully awakened and fully actualized soul on the planet. And this is when the healing actually happens. But when you are imbalanced, this is when we cause wounds to our own self. And this is when we cause wounds to other people. So let's talk about the, I'm going to share with you a little bit about what, and if you see me looking over to the side, I'm trying to access my notes here because I have a lot of notes from my guides. This isn't all coming from me. This is what they shared to me. And so let's talk about the ego side of the consciousness, which is where the white collective in America is coming from mostly. And by the way, when I say it's a collective, there are always exceptions. There are always exceptions. There are always individual souls that come to even be, to really shake shit up and not even be in that whatsoever, to be wildly different from that whatsoever. So they will be, in black skin and be completely in their ego consciousness. Right. And, but we're talking but the majority of the souls that manifest there's a collective experience that you come to have. And so let's talk about that. So when you're a white American and you're white in America, your soul has chosen to come and to manifest and to operate more in the ego side of its consciousness. By the way, this is not, you don't solely operate in your ego consciousness across all your relationships. This is another thing that to understand, and I'll be doing a separate video to talk about this in depth. But for instance, men, if your soul manifests in a male body, you are also going to be operating more off of your ego consciousness when it comes to male-female relationships. If you are a female, if you're a woman, you are going to be operating more off the soul consciousness and the right side of the brain when it comes to male-female relationships. And my guide showed me, again, you have differences, you manifest, because your soul is a multi-dimensional being. So every relationship you have is almost a different dimension, and you operate out of that in a separate perspective. And so your parent-child can often be different, where the parent may be in the ego consciousness, the child may be in the soul consciousness. Teacher-student is often ego. But so what you're basically having in almost every relationship that you have, you're going to be either operating out of your ego consciousness or your soul consciousness predominantly in that relationship. And that relationship is there to help you learn to balance the two, to come out of both sides of your consciousness in that relationship. So the black and white is a relationship that we're having. Black peoples and white people is a relationship. And in this relationship, white people are predominantly coming from the ego side of the consciousness. Black people are predominantly coming from the soul side of the consciousness. And so let's talk about the ego. The ego, when it is the ego part of the consciousness, when you are in your the gifts of it. So this is why I was saying that the ego is not to be demonized. It is only when you're imbalanced in your ego that suffering happens. And so the ego side, when it is the gifts of the ego side, this is the part of the consciousness that allows you to feel personally empowered. This is where your power comes from. Is when you are in your ego consciousness, you feel empowered. You also have a voice and you use it. You speak your truth. You say what you need to say. You use your voice to create and manifest. You also use your voice to empower yourself and to empower others. That is in the ego side of the consciousness. The ego side of the consciousness is also where things like technology is created and science is made, right? And this is why, we have high advances in America around these things. And this is also where you have a strong sense of self. Like, you don't get lost in conforming. You don't get lost in conforming. You know individually what you want. You know individually what you need. And you get your needs met. When you're in your ego consciousness and it is strong, you get your personal needs met. You have a strong sense of boundaries. You don't get walked over. People don't walk over you much. You're not a people pleaser aspect when you're in your ego. This is the healthy part of the ego. You're not a people pleaser. You know what you get, your individual needs as your soul self having a human experience. You get them met when you are in your ego consciousness. When you are out of balance in your ego consciousness. So those are the gifts. Those are the main gifts of the ego, of the ego consciousness in the left side of the brain. Now, you can also study the left side of the brain. We'll talk about this later, about all the different things that it operates as well. This is where your language comes in, where you're able to use your words and communicate and speak and say what you need to say. That is in the left. This is the ego in the left side of the consciousness, right? So, but when you are out of balance, and this is for my white brothers and sisters that are watching, this is where the racism and the conflict is coming in. When you are out of balance in the ego, and the white collective consciousness has been out of balance on the ego side, you have been, because everything that all of our institutions and our schools and even the religions that we have in the West are all created from the ego part. And so the ego is continually getting fed and continually getting nourished and enhanced, and the soul consciousness is not. And so when the ego is imbalanced, you go over into narcissism. And this is what's been happening. If you watched my initial video around this, I talked about how the white consciousness is narcissistic. what I meant, and my guides talked to me a little to get more clarity around this, and I understand this. What I meant is when the white consciousness is in the ego part and it gets too enhanced and it's over. So what I mean by it's out of balance. So your ego consciousness is up here and your soul consciousness is down here. And when you have a chasm like this is when you go into narcissism. And when you go into narcissism, this is when the wounds start. Because narcissism is about me, 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 me. Narcissism is also about domination. This is where slavery has come from. This is where colonialism comes from. It's about I need to get everything that I can. I need to get everything I can get. I need to get everything to serve me, and not concerning myself. Because the other reason why is because when you go into narcissism, you have apathy, so you don't have empathy. So I don't feel connected to. And I get everything I can get to the expense of you, because I don't feel connected to you. I don't feel at one with you. Remember, the soul consciousness is where the oneness is. So when you're high in your ego consciousness, you don't feel a sense of oneness with someone else. You don't feel a sense of connection with someone else. And so this is where also you feel like what happens to you doesn't have any consequence to me, because you don't understand your connection. So you don't understand when you're and this is what's happening in the white collective consciousness. They don't understand that what you do to black people is actually affecting you as well, because we're one and the same. We're connected. So you don't understand that. So that's why you can do things like slavery. That's why you can do things like appropriation. That's why you can do things like colonialism, like collectively, and not understand, because that's where the imbalance in the ego consciousness is from. It goes over into narcissism. This is where the wound of the ego consciousness is. It is when narcissism happens. And this is where it's about me, 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 me. This is also why you say all lives matter. Because you can't sit, when you're in the narcissistic aspect of your consciousness, when you're imbalanced like that, you can't see someone else have their power. And you can't see a light shined on anyone else. You always have to recenter everything back to yourself. This is what's at the root of all lives matter. It's a narcissistic response. It's I need the attention to come back to me. So how dare you say your life matters right now? My life matters. How dare you say your life matters? My life matters. That's what it's about, right? That's what's at the core of this. And so when you understand that, right, the healing of the ego consciousness and the healing for my white brothers and sisters who are asking, what do we do? How do we heal this? This is what has to happen. You have got to balance your ego consciousness with your soul consciousness. And you'll learn a little bit more about that when I talk about what the soul consciousness is. But that is about highly, highly increasing empathy, highly, highly, highly understanding your connection, and taking and letting the me aspect of yourself take a back seat for a second. You have to let me take a back seat to we. And that is not something that you have learned. That's not something that, because our society was built from an imbalanced ego consciousness. It was built from a narcissistic consciousness space. And so it's been fueling the aspect of me, 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 me. It's been fueling the aspect of separation and high independence and not codependence, right? And so you can't have a balance. You can't have independence and codependence. But we have been out of balance in this country, where it's been highly independence and nothing about codependence at all. It's been me, 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 not we. And bringing the attention of everything back to me. And because of, so it's been mostly bringing attention back to whiteness, and instead of the we-ness that exists, right? And so this is what happens when you are out of balance in the ego side of the consciousness. When you are healthy in the ego consciousness, you have a side of balance, that's where your gifts come out. That's where what I talked about, your sense of empowerment comes out, your sense of boundaries and getting your needs met comes out. And when the ego consciousness is balanced and when it is healed, it brings humanity together. Like, think about an example that my guides showed me was like, think about social media. Like, this was out of the white consciousness. right? Which is out of the ego consciousness, but it was it was created from that, but it was also initially came from the balance. So it connected everyone. So this is where technology, because remember, technology comes from the left side of the brain and the ego part of the consciousness. So this is where this comes from, but it connected humanity more. Right? It connected humanity more. This is what this is the gifts that when the white consciousness, the white collective consciousness, when they begin to balance, this is how they bring the world back together in unconditional love. They bring us together and they move us forward through technology, through science, through things like that. Right? That is where, and again, I'm not saying that's the only way as a white person that you will bring this forward. Remember, every soul has nuances. Every soul has differences, but you have your personal perspective that you came, and then you have collective. And this is the gift of the white collective. It is really when they balance, they will bring humanity together and they will move us forward together through technology and science. All right. So let's go into the soul consciousness. And by the way, I see a lot of you all are in here. If you're watching and you have questions, again, you feel free to ask me questions. I don't see any coming up now. I'm on my phone because my computer is in the shop. It's been in the computer for a month. Send me energy, y'all, because it has really been taking a lot for me to deal with not having my computer. With all this pandemic, it takes Apple. I have an Apple. And in order to get my computer fixed, I had to ship it to Apple for them to fix it. And with all this pandemic, it has to sit in the post office for 2 weeks to kind of quarantine itself before they send it out to New York where it has to be worked on. So it may be another 2 weeks to another month before I get my computer back. So I'm having to do everything on my phone. So please send me some energy on that. That has been a challenge. So, all right, let's go into the soul consciousness and what my guys were saying about the soul consciousness. The soul consciousness exists on the right side of the brain. And the right side of the brain is where your intuition lives, is where your trust is. Excuse me. It's where your art and your talents are. And the soul part of the brain is where your empathy is, and your sense of oneness. So the soul consciousness is where your sense of connection and oneness is. And thank you all for the love and the patience. I definitely need it. So that's the soul part of your that's the soul consciousness. Remember, we live in a dimension of duality. You have two parts to your consciousness. You have to operate in both. But when you're when you chose to be black, your soul chose to manifest to be black in this particular lifetime, in this country, you are going to be more soul consciousness dominant, meaning you are going to operate more out of your soul consciousness than you are in your ego consciousness. So what happens when you're in, by the way, remember, I'm looking at my notes over here. So what happens when you're in your soul consciousness, the gifts of that, right, is you're very talented. There's no coincidence. I know we have said this is a stereotype. We said that we have classified them as stereotypes, but that's actually what I was shown. And this kind of blew my own mind because I was just like, I was the one that was like, we stereotype us, that's stereotypes. But when they showed me this and it was like, no, there's actually some truth to this. And it was an intention behind it. This is why black folks are very talented. This is why we have the stereotypes of being very good dancers and very good singers and very good artists. There's not a coincidence for this. This is absolutely true because we came to exist. Our soul chose with an intention to exist in a black body to operate more in life from the right side of the brain, from the soul consciousness part of the brain, which is where your talents are. Which is where your talents and your creativity and stuff, that's where it exists. So this is why we're very creative and we're very talented. This is why we're always making up new dances. This is why we always have new languages. We always have different, we create little nuances in language. This is why we're very creative beings, right? And when you look at the relationship between black and white, this is why appropriation happens a lot. Because the white collective consciousness is operating off of the ego side, and not learning how to balance that. They're not taught how to balance this part of the brain. So to access a lot of their talents and their skills, they appropriate. This is literally, and this was kind of a mind-blowing thing for me when my guides were telling me this. I was like, oh my God, this is why this is happening. This is why this happens like this, and nobody's teaching us this, and nobody's really teaching. Instead, we're attacking each other and not understanding, oh, there's a different way we all need to exist with each other so that you learn, because this is why. And so the other part of this is you attract each other. We need each other. We need each other. This is why we attract each other. We attract each other because we are here to teach each other how to operate out of the size of the consciousness that we exist in. So white people, your gift to us is teaching us how to operate more out of the ego part of the consciousness. We are here to learn how to, and you'll see this in a second. Actually, let me make a note. I'm going to come back to that. Let me make a note. Our gift to each other, to talk about that at the end. But we need each other. So let me say that, and then I'll share at the end of this why we need each other and how you can see that. And this is the key to the healing. All right, so soul consciousness. So the right side of it operates off the right side of the brain predominantly, and it's the gifts, it's the intuition. This is also why Black folks are very intuitive. This is why we are also, but we're taught, and we've been socialized and traumatized out of our intuition. But this is why we're also highly psychic and highly intuitive. But because of religion, that part of we've been made to suppress that aspect of us. But we are highly intuitive beings. We are highly intuitive because we came to be that. We came to be more in tune with that. We came to be more in tune with our intuition and our psychic gifts, because that is this part of the soul consciousness. That is part of the intuitive part of the right side of the brain. We already exist more predominantly in that. We've just been suppressing it. This is also why, even in religion, why Black folks in America, why our religion looks different. Why Black church looks different. There's a reason why it looks different. Even though it's the same, even though they're practicing the same religion, the way they move about it is very different. There's a different why Black folks speak in tongues, and why they dance in church, and why there's a lot of singing, and why there's a lot of clapping, and because that's coming from the soul part of the consciousness. And so this is like all this was being downloaded. This is the mind-blowing aspect of this. This is why this happens. There's a full soul reason why there is a difference between Black and white church. White church is coming from the ego part of the consciousness. So it's going to be more analytical. It's going to be more rational. It's going to be more scientific, right? And Black church is coming more out of the right brain and more out of the soul side of the consciousness. So it's going to be more creative. It's going to be more intuitive. It's going to have all of that aspect in it. So that's the gifts, right? And so when you are not imbalanced in that, and you have access to your right brain or soul consciousness dominant, but you still have access to your ego, what ends up happening is you are empowered, and you move humanity forward in more creative ways that humanity has not seen before. And you are extremely powerful. When an empath, when a Black person is in their consciousness, and you are also balanced, and so you have access to the soul consciousness and the ego consciousness, you are very powerful, and you move humanity forward as well, and you do it in very creative ways. So think about like Oprah Winfrey. This is an example of someone a Black soul, who is moving both out of the ego side of the consciousness and the right side of the consciousness, but is right brain dominant. So that is why she's bringing things forward like Super Soul Sunday. That is why, though, she was in her power and in her ego part of the consciousness and had a network, right? Think about Barack Obama. Think about Maya Angelou. Think about Martin Luther King Jr. Think about Harriet Tubman. Like for Harriet Tubman, this is the thing. Like, yes, like it was the whole Underground Railroad and moving the slave was highly creative, but she was empowered. She had a sense of power. She had a sense of boundaries. She said she was thinking about herself, but also thinking about other people. Right. So this is what happens when we're as Black souls, when we balance these two sides of our consciousness. But here's what happens when we don't. Just like in the white collective consciousness, when it goes over balance, it goes into narcissism. What happens with the Black collective consciousness, when you go too far onto the soul consciousness side of things and you don't balance it with the ego side of the consciousness, what happens is you go into hyper empathy. You go into hyper empathy. And what my guides told me around this is what ends up happening with this is you become disempowered. You don't have a sense of self-empowerment. You give your power away a lot. You give it away a lot. And then you also open up to abuse. You also open up yourself up to be victimized because you're not in your own self of self-empowerment. And when I mean self-empowered, I'm not just talking about physical power and fighting. I'm also talking about energetic power. You're not in your own belief system. Because when you're in hyper empathy, you're an empath. And I talked about this in my other video. When you come in to be, when you're in the right side of your consciousness and you're in soul consciousness, you're going to be an empath. What's called an empath. And so you're going to be, which means you're highly sensitive to information from energy, the energy that comes from other people's emotions, the energy that comes from environments, the energy that comes from situations. So when you're in hyper empathy, what ends up happening is you don't have a sense of your own personal power. You're caught up and you become a doormat. So people walk over you easily. And Black folks, you can obviously see this happening with us. You become a people pleaser. And you become what's the word? You become susceptible to groupthink. So you don't have your own sense of what do I actually believe myself? What do I actually want for myself? You come into like this, you come into this groupthink, and you can see this again in Black culture. This is why we have this whole thing around what it means exactly to be Black, and you better fit into this particular box around being Black. And if you don't fit into this box, we don't see you as Black. Like you have by the way, a gift of being on this side of the consciousness, of being in the soul consciousness, and this is something with the gift of Blackness, is you have a high sense of community and a high sense of belonging. A high sense of community, a high sense of belonging. But when it's out of balance, and you don't have an ego, it goes from community and belonging and it goes into conformity. So there's a pressure to be conformed and to operate only one type of way. And this is where that thing comes in our consciousness, where we begin to tell each other, unless you look like this or operate like this, you're not Black. That's where that's coming from. It's the imbalance. And so, and the other part of that is you don't have any boundaries. Because you're operating more out of the oneness thing. So it's a hard time for you to really take ownership of you. You're more for community. You're more for family. You're more for this. And you don't. And instead of understanding what you need and the boundaries you need, so that you get violated a lot. And what ends up happening is you have a lot of resentment and a lot of rage. Because you're being consistently violated, because you don't have boundaries, and you're not feeling a sense of empowerment, and you don't have a strong sense of self. And this is what happens, and this is what's happened in the Black consciousness. We have gone too far out of balance to where we have gone into hyper empathy, and white consciousness has gone too far out of balance to where they have gone into narcissism. And this is where the issues are coming from. And this is where the racism is. We are both in the imbalanced aspects of our consciousness, and we have to come, not necessarily come together, but we have to do our individual work to increase. So it's not about suppressing a side of the consciousness. So The soul and healing is not about suppressing anything. Suppressing brings more illness. So you're not about suppressing the ego side of your consciousness or suppressing the soul side of your consciousness. What you need to do is you need to raise the other part of the consciousness up. You need to learn how to enhance that part of the consciousness in you. So the key for white people is to raise the soul consciousness so that you raise the empathy. So you are going to raise the empathic aspects of yourself. You are trying to learn how to enhance the feeling of connection to other people that are not like you, the feeling of understanding that what happens to that other person is happening to you because you are one with them, right? Also the increasing of your intuition and your trust. This is the aspect for the white people. This is why the path for healing racism and racial conflict for white people is about listening more. It's about taking the me part, because that's the narcissism part, the me part out of the equation, and kind of stepping a step back and listening and trying to see what we have to say, right? And part of that is about seeing other people, particularly black folks, seeing them, hearing them, and valuing and honoring what you hear and what you see. So that you can understand through that process of seeing, hearing, and valuing and honoring, what you're going to understand through that is, oh my God, you're just like me. That's me. Oh my God, that dude is me. He may have black skin, he may do this differently, but that's me. You'll feel the oneness. Black folks, you already feel oneness. This is why, and I talked about this in my other video, this is why when you see something happen to another black person, when you see them experience police brutality or you see them experience racism, you don't just feel it as, oh, look what happened to that guy over there. You literally feel it as, that happened to me. That's why it emotionally hits you harder, because you are hyper empathic. You feel that the emotions of that, and you feel the experience of what happened to that black person. You feel it as if it was happening to you. Our white brothers and sisters aren't quite there yet. This is what they are having to learn. This is why we're having, and this is why you have to understand. This is where the compassion comes in. You have to understand that side of the brain, it's not that they don't want to, is that from operating from that side of the brain, they can't yet. They can't even see it. That's why you have a hard time when you talk to some white people that haven't really learned to balance the brain yet, that are in the narcissistic aspect. That's why they have a hard time understanding why you care about that. This is why they have a hard time understanding why Colin Kaepernick knelt and was doing police violence, because to them, he has money. He has he's a football player. He's a celebrity. He has entitlement. He's not like that. So why should he care about that? So when he was kneeling, that's why they had such a hard time with it. Because from the narcissistic brain, they don't understand why you would feel connected to that. So to them, it felt like you were attacking them personally. Because again, that's what the narcissistic, when we're in the narcissistic wound, everything is an attack on me, instead of me, like any boundary that you set or when you speak up for yourself, it's an attack on me instead of me, because I haven't been taught, and I'm not in the part of my being that can see and hear and honor you. So when you speak up, instead of me hearing you and seeing you, it's an attack on me. And also, I don't know the oneness of things. I don't feel that. So I don't understand where you're coming from. There's no way for me to see it. And this is where the healing, this is where the disconnect is happening all over the place, right? And we both are playing parts in this. This is why I'm trying to say it's not just the ego side, the soul side has wounds too. For the soul, again, when you're in the soul side and you're imbalanced over there, you're not in the other part that I didn't say that I'll do another video on to go deeper into. The soul side, when you're imbalanced over there, this is where a lot of your fears get implemented, and the shame, and where you don't have a sense of enoughness and worthiness, and you don't have a sense of trust, and you start to fear. And this is from that fear and that distrust and that sense of unworthiness, you are manifesting. This is a really high thing to understand. You manifest from your emotional state. That is your vibration or your frequency. You've heard a lot of people talk about vibration. They're not really teaching it in fullness yet, quite, because your vibration is your emotional state, how you feel internally. And if you feel, and what you feel has to get manifest as your reality. So I talked about this is the reality of, this is the world of duality. It's also the world of reflection or mirroring. So you've heard about the law of attraction, and what it really is the law of mirroring. And the attraction is kind of the wrong word for it. I won't say the wrong, it's just not complete. This is the world of mirroring. So your reality that you live, your personal life and reality that you move in and that you see in, is you are responsible for your personal reality. We collectively are responsible for the collective reality. And how that gets shaped is the emotional state that you keep inside of you, like how you habitually feel is what the universe takes, and it manifests the experiences that you have, the events that happen in your life, and the relationships that get attracted to you. And they will all come in and mirror back to you what your emotional state is. So, Black folks, if you feel that this world is not safe, if you feel that you're not safe in the world to be Black, what happens is you continually manifest a world and a life that makes you feel unsafe. You continually to manifest experiences that make you feel unsafe. And because as an empath, you feel things higher, when you're more on the right side of the brain and the soul consciousness side of the brain, your feelings and your vibrations, you vibrate higher. So you manifest faster and you manifest better. This is something that hasn't been being taught, and we really need to understand this. Black people manifest faster because we feel deeper, because we are the empaths. So why that's really important is when you are in hyper empathy and you're not taught how to really take care of your own emotional state and really set boundaries so you can protect your emotional state and really stand in your power, you get operated, you manifest more from fear and shame. And so you are manifesting and so here's another, let me make this even more clear. When you feel victimized and abused, you continue to manifest situations that abuse and victimize you. This is our role in why racism is continuing. And I know this is very triggering because what we've been taught is something they need to fix. We don't have any role in this whatsoever. That's not true. We actually do. Our role is to empower ourselves, to heal our emotional states from the fear and the shame that has been put there. It's not our fault why it's there, but it is our responsibility to heal it. We have to heal the fear and the shame that is in our vibrational state so we can stop creating and manifesting experiences that cause us to be victimized and abused. Now, you're not doing this intentionally. I am not saying this whatsoever. You're not creating these things intentionally, but your emotional state, regardless of whether that's what you wanted to create or not, the universe only listens to how you're feeling, and it creates based upon that. We feel this way because of the trauma we've experienced and the negative socialization we've experienced. So it's not our fault why we feel that way, but it is our responsibility now. And this is why I'm here, and this is why I am getting ready to do these videos. I'm getting ready to offer a course. I'm getting ready to offer a lot so that we can heal our internal emotional state and our belief systems so that we can manifest something different. when it comes to race. We can manifest something healthier. We can manifest something happier. Okay? So that's really important about the when you're out of balance with the in the soul consciousness, you go into hyper empathy, and this is what happens. You get disempowered. You have a lot of fear and shame. You don't have boundaries, and you are taken advantage of. You opening yourself up to get abused, and so what I said is the thing that happens. What my guys talked about is that when you come into one of those, when your soul chooses to be in one of those things, what ends up happening is you will attract the person, the opposite, to help you heal. So black and white people are attracting each other because the ego, the predominant ego consciousness needs somebody that is in predominant soul consciousness to teach them how to be more in their soul consciousness so they can balance. The predominant soul consciousness will attract someone who is predominantly in their ego consciousness so they can learn how to embody more of their ego consciousness so they can balance. This happens across all the relationships of your life, by the way, not just in black and white, but I'm just talking about black and white today. But this happens in everything. Like if you are, for women, if you are predominantly in your soul consciousness and you are high in empathy, you're going to attract a man or you're going to attract another partner who is predominantly in their ego consciousness so that you can learn how to step into your power, so you can learn how to set boundaries, so that you can learn how to focus on your own needs and stop trying to always meet the needs of other people. This is something also, that was another thing about the wound of soul consciousness, which is one of the wounds of when you go over to hyper empathy, which is also the wound of black consciousness. You will meet you meet the needs of other people at the expense of your own. So you're always meeting the needs of others, because remember, your consciousness is more oriented towards we. Is oriented towards we and not me. So you're always meeting the needs. You're meeting the needs of other people. You say yes more when you really need to say no, and you don't have strong boundaries. And so what ends up happening is, again, this is how you get walked over. This is how you begin to be people-pleasing, and you don't really stand up for your own self. And what you need to do is you need to get stronger in your ego consciousness. And so this is why we need each other and why we will attract each other, because for the soul consciousness, the person that is predominantly in the soul consciousness, you need to learn how to be in your ego, because that's how you fill your cup. That's how you get your needs met. That's how you understand what your individual power feels like. That's how you set boundaries. That's how you begin to move into the world with understanding how to honor what your soul is here to do, what your individual self is here to do, and not just always about, always showing up for others. You are beginning to put yourself first, and then you meet others once your needs are met. That's what you are to learn as a black person and as a person who is predominantly in soul consciousness. That's why you will attract someone. That's why we have attracted white people. That's what we're to learn from them. That's what we're to take from them. And if you look at them, that's what they've learned more collectively. They are, that's why, they have businesses. That's why also this is where you get good with money. When you're in highly in your soul consciousness more and you don't have access, you're not really accessing your ego consciousness, you will have problems with money. This is also why a lot of spiritual people, the healers, the psychics, the intuitives, those people are going to be mostly predominantly soul consciousness, mostly right-brained. That's why they struggle with money a lot. And if you're a healer and you're a psychic or you're someone like that, on my feed, I'm speaking the truth. That's why you tend to struggle with money a lot. It's because you have not, and we've been taught a lot, and this is also in the spiritual realm. So I was telling you about this, is we've been not accurately taught in spirituality. There's a lot of teaching in spirituality to suppress the ego, to get out of the ego, to let it die. And when you do that, you don't have a sense of personal power. You won't have boundaries. You won't get your personal needs met. Or when I speak about needs, what I'm also speaking about, your personal dreams won't get fulfilled. Your personal dreams won't manifest because you need your ego consciousness to help you do that. And you won't also have abundance in money because that's in the ego part of the consciousness, right? Now, again, when it's out of balance, you go from abundance to money to greed. You try to hoard and get all for me. This is also why we're seeing this in the white collective consciousness, right? Hoarding and me, and taking all the resources. But when you're balanced, you don't hoard. You get into what you have a sense of prosperity and abundance for yourself, and then you share. This is why a lot of the billionaires, not all of them, but this is why a lot of the billionaires are having problems. This is why we have problems with them, is there's no sharing. And it's because they are highly in the ego consciousness to where they've gone on to narcissism and they don't have the empathy. Their empathy is low. And this is what our society needs to be working on. It's balancing the two, and it's two different paths. For Black folks, we need to enhance. And again, you do not suppress. You do not suppress your soul consciousness. You do not suppress your empathy. You raise your ego consciousness. You raise it up. And as you raise it up, it begins to heal the woundedness over here. For my white family, you don't suppress your ego consciousness. You raise your soul consciousness. So you are raising your empathy. You are raising your sense of oneness. You are raising your sense of intuition and trust. And this is how we heal. And you'll be able to see each other. So Black people, we need to set boundaries. We are going to have to be empowered, both financially and personally and mentally and energetically. We're going to have to do that type of work of really starting to come into power and starting to understand we have a self and we need to meet our needs. That is our healing. White people, it is time to do the work of enhancing empathy, to understanding and seeing other people, to valuing what you see, to step back, to step the I back for a minute, and to let the we rise. Black people, we have got to let the we come back a little bit. Well, to let the I, like to step back and to focus more on the I. So this is the path. And this is what my guys have shared with me a bit. I have a lot to say around this, more about this. How do we do this? A lot more about to understand how the wounds are showing up in our protective consciousness and how to address them individually. But also to understand what happens in healing. And because you are a soul, how this happens, how healing actually happens is you have to heal yourself first. You don't heal the community first and then heal yourself. It doesn't work like that. It doesn't go out from how this actually works in this dimension. Things happen from the inside out. Remember, the outside is the mirrored side. So it's the mirror. So if you don't like what's in the mirror, you don't go and change the mirror. Like if I don't like what's being reflected in the mirror, I don't like try and clean the mirror and try to change the mirror off. I don't do that. What I do first is I change me. And then my reflection in the mirror will be changed. That's how change works first. We've got to do our internal work. So Black folks, your internal work is increasing your ego consciousness. White people, your internal work is to increase your soul consciousness. And then once you've done that, you come into collective. And then we do the collective healing. This is the big step. Now, I'm not saying completely give up on the work of doing systems changing and all that. But I'm saying if you're doing all of these things and we're not doing the internal personal work, it's not going to work. And this is why it's not been working yet. We have done system changes for years. We did it with the civil rights movement. We did it with all these things. We've been doing system changes. We did it with affirmative action. But if you do not change the internal state and the internal consciousness, those systems are just going to keep getting worse. We'll change them right back. Either we'll change them back or we'll find loopholes in them to keep operating out of the toxicity. And so now is the time to do our own internal work and to do work collectively. So we need to do internal work personally and internal work collectively, and then we will come together and do external work. And the internal work is separate. So there needs to be some separate spaces. So there needs to be spaces for the white souls to do their work of learning how to increase their soul consciousness, and the black souls to do their work from learning how to increase their ego consciousness. And then we'll come together from what we've done where we're more in balance, and we'll begin to really create systems that serve all of us together. So I hope this has helped. I didn't see any questions throughout this. I saw a lot of you all say that this was important and this made a lot of sense and this connected dots for you all. So thank you so much. It is my great intention here for sharing this, that this be a medicine somehow, that this really help connect dots, that this give an aha, that this help heal you in some way, and this help you really take on your responsibility that you came here to do as a soul, to begin to bring humanity back into balance. This is what it's all about. We're out of balance, and we need to come back into balance. And you've got to look where you personally are out of balance and begin to do the work of balancing yourself. And then we will look to do community-wise how we're out of balance and bringing our whole community back into balance. This is possible. We can heal this, but it's going to take some work, and it's going to take some system changes, definitely, and I'll be talking about that as well. But it's really going to take you doing your own personal work of getting yourself back into balance, of healing the fears and the shame, of increasing the empathy, of increasing your personal empowerment and boundaries, and then we'll come together and do our collective work together as humans. So I hope this, helps you. As always, you guys, I love you. Thank you so much for tuning in and letting me share this. And until next time, go love yourself. Bye.